Welcome to the Playing Books Podcast.
We are launching into a deep dive today that honestly might just offer a whole new operating system for your brain.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful stuff. We've waded through just an incredible amount of material, our notes, all the research, our analysis of Carol S. Dweck, PhD's really groundbreaking work, Mindset, the new psychology of success. And we're here today to basically pull out the absolute core insights for you.
That's the goal. You know, for anyone feeling overwhelmed by just information overload these days, think of this episode as your shortcut, a shortcut to being really deeply informed about the science behind potential.
Right.
Because Dweck lays out these two core psychological frameworks. She calls them the fixed mindset, or FM, and the growth mindset, GM. And her argument is that these frameworks pretty much determine not just what we achieve, but like how we experience our entire lives.
Everything, from school to work.
Right. To relationships, yeah. So our mission today is really to extract the practical lessons, stuff you can actually use, and, challenge you, the listener, to actively let these ideas maybe enhance your own life.
And what makes this research so gripping, I think, is where it started.
Yeah.
It wasn't some abstract theory cooked up in a lab.
No.
It began with Dweck when she was a young researcher, just observing kids, watching them face failure.
Simple observation.
Yeah, she was kind of obsessed, it sounds like, with figuring out why some kids just bounce back from setbacks while others completely crumbled. So she'd bring children into a room, give them some easy puzzles first, build their confidence.
Right, set them up.
And then she'd hit them with the really hard ones, puzzles way beyond what they could easily solve.
And you'd think, okay, she's just going to categorize how they cope, right? Some try harder, some ask for help, maybe some just give up. That was the expectation. But the reaction of a few kids just completely knocked her sideways. It changed everything. She talks about this one 10-year-old boy faced with these impossible puzzles, right?
Yeah.
Instead of getting stressed, he pulls his chair closer, rubs his hands together, like genuinely excited, and says, I was hoping this would be challenging.
Wow. I mean, that's almost unnatural, isn't it? Most of us, when we see a clear chance of failing or, looking stupid,
We back off.
we totally back off. But this kid, this 10-year-old, saw a tough problem as a chance to grow, not as some kind of final verdict on his ability right then and there.
Exactly. And you contrast him with the other students who did what you'd expect. They grunted, they got sweaty,
Oh, yeah.
they struggled. And for them, those hard puzzles weren't just puzzles. They felt like proof that they were deficient somehow.
Defining moments of failure for them.
Yes. And that moment, that stark difference in how kids responded to difficulty, that's what launched Dweck's decades of research into these two mindsets, fixed and growth.
Okay, so let's lay the groundwork then. What exactly are these two mindsets, and why do they cause such completely different reactions when things get tough?
Right. Let's break it down. The foundation.
So the fixed mindset, FM, it's built on this, well, frankly, kind of scary idea that your basic qualities, your intelligence, your talents, your personality, maybe even your character, they're just fixed traits.
Set in stone.
Yeah. You've got a certain amount, you were born with it, and that's your lot. Like you have a finite amount of smartness or talent currency.
And if you truly believe that deep down, think about how that changes everything. Life basically becomes this endless series of high-stakes tests.
Right.
Your main goal isn't learning, it's proving you're competent. It's avoiding mistakes at all costs. Why? Because in that FM world, one single evaluation, a test score, a bad presentation, a performance review feels like it can measure you and define you forever.
Pressure.
It's immense.
Yeah.
Dweck points out that people with a fixed mindset, they don't really give themselves the space to become better. They feel this intense pressure to already be great.
That fear, it's captured so well in that story Dweck tells about Loretta.
Oh, yeah, that's a tough one.
Right. She's 5 years old, moves to the U.S., gets tested at her new school, and she gets placed in the regular kindergarten class. But this school had this elite track, the Eagles class.
The special ones.
Exactly. And even though Loretta eventually did great academically, got moved into the Eagles class later, won tons of awards, for her entire academic life, she felt like she wasn't a true Eagle.
Isn't that heartbreaking? A test score at age 5 during a super stressful time moving to a new country becomes this permanent internal label, like a scarlet letter she couldn't shake. It didn't matter what she actually achieved later. She saw that initial test as defining her fixed ability. Forever.
It just erases all the context, doesn't it? All the other factors. It just boils her down to this one fragile data point from when she was 5.
And that fragility, that's what leads to what Dweck sees as the core issue with the fixed mindset, distortion.
Distortion.
How so? Well, if your entire sense of self-worth is tangled up in protecting this idea that you're naturally smart or talented,
You have to protect it.
you have to protect it. So you start twisting information. You blow good outcomes way out of proportion. I aced that test, see, I'm gifted. And you find excuses for the bad ones. Oh, I failed because the teacher hates me, or the questions were unfair, or my equipment wasn't working right.
Anything but maybe I need to study differently, or
Yeah.
maybe I wasn't prepared.
Precisely. And the tragic result is that the person with the fixed mindset stops seeking real self-knowledge, because real knowledge might be, well, unflattering.
It might challenge the gifted label.
Exactly. So they end up kind of disconnected from reality, all in an effort to avoid feeling judged.
Okay, so that's the fixed mindset. What about the alternative, the growth mindset, GM?
Right. The growth mindset completely flips the script. The core belief here is that all those qualities we cherish, intelligence, talent, creativity, even personality, they aren't fixed at all. They can be cultivated, they can be developed profoundly through effort, through dedicated practice, through learning from experience, through training. It's about development.
And this isn't just some feel-good idea, right? It actually lines up with science.
Oh, absolutely. Decades of work, especially in neuroscience. Dweck really stresses this isn't about nature versus nurture. It's nature and nurture constantly interacting.
Like a conversation.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Like the neuroscientist Gilbert Gottlieb showed, genes aren't just static blueprints waiting to unfold. They actually need input from the environment. Things like training, new experiences, challenges to even work properly and express themselves. Development is dynamic, it's not predetermined.
So our experiences actually shape how our innate potential unfolds.
Precisely. And the key takeaway, something really hammered home by intelligence experts like Robert Sternberg, is that the major factor in achieving real expertise isn't some fixed starting ability. It's purposeful engagement.
Purposeful engagement,
Meaning it's not just about trying hard randomly. It's about intentional, focused effort, strategic practice. Learning from mistakes. It's the person who consistently and deliberately works at it who gets ahead, not necessarily the one who started out seeming the most talented.
So it's less about the starting line and more about the quality of the effort along the way.
Exactly. And because the growth mindset hinges on this idea of constant development, people with this mindset tend to believe that true potential is actually, well, unknown. And maybe even unknowable.
Unknowable. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like, how can you possibly predict what someone might achieve with years, maybe decades, of passion, hard work, and dedicated training? They're not worried about hitting some imaginary ceiling because they're focused on climbing the ladder step by step.
That explains some of those surprising stories Dweck includes. People who seemed totally ordinary early on, but achieved incredible things.
Right. It really challenges that whole born genius myth. Think about Charles Darwin, apparently. He was a pretty mediocre student, struggled to find his way initially.
Didn't know that.
Or Leo Tolstoy failed out of university. Ben Hogan, one of the greatest golfers ever, described early on as awkward, uncoordinated.
Wow.
The photographer Cindy Sherman failed her first photography class. And the amazing actress Geraldine Page was literally told to quit acting because she supposedly lacked talent.
That's incredible. These examples really drive home that where you start doesn't dictate where you finish.
Yeah.
It's about the belief that you can develop that qualities aren't just fixed.
It's all about the journey, the process, the belief in malleability shaped by work and will.
Okay, so to really nail down the difference, let's use Dweck's bad day scenario.
Yeah.
Imagine you, listening right now. You have a really rough day.
Okay, set the scene.
You get a midterm back, it's a C+, disappointing. Then you find a parking ticket on your car. Ugh. And to top it off, you call your best friend to vent, and they kind of brush you off, say they're busy.
Ouch. Bad day.
Yeah. So if you're running on the fixed mindset operating system, how does that feel?
Devastating. It's not just a series of unfortunate events, it's a personal indictment. The C+ isn't just a grade, it screams, I am a failure.
Right.
The parking ticket proves, I'm irresponsible, I'm flawed, your friend brushing you off means I'm unlikable, they don't care about me, maybe this friendship is doomed. Every single negative thing becomes proof of your fixed inherent inadequacy.
And what does that lead to? Feeling ashamed? Defensive?
Oh, totally. Shame, defensiveness, maybe anger, wanting to blame someone else, or just wanting to crawl into a hole and give up.
Okay. Now, same bad day, C plus, say, take it, friend brush off, but through the growth mindset lens. How does that look?
Completely different. The GM sees these events not as judgments, but as, well, challenging information. Information that requires action and maybe a change in strategy.
So the C plus
So
becomes,
C plus becomes, okay, my current study methods obviously aren't working for this class. I need a new approach. What did I miss? Who can I talk to?
the parking ticket.
Ugh, frustrating. I really need to manage my time better getting out the door or find a better parking spot. How can I avoid this next time?
And the friend.
Huh, they sounded really stressed. Maybe they're having a rough day too. I should probably check back in later, see if everything's okay. See this shift.
Yeah, it's huge. It shifts instantly from I am bad to there's a problem to be solved.
Exactly. The focus moves from internal condemnation to external solvable challenges.
And this really highlights something critical you mentioned earlier, the need for accurate information. The GM person needs to be open to that C plus S, even though it stings.
Right, because that C plus contains the data needed for improvement. The FM person tries to screen it out or explain it away to protect their ego.
But the GM person, maybe reluctantly, welcomes it. Okay, this tells me something I need to know.
That willingness to face unflattering feedback, to see it as data for the next attempt, that's the absolute key that unlocks growth.
That fear of unflattering information, it seems really tied to another big FM idea. The myth that real success, true genius, should look effortless.
Oh, absolutely. The effortless perfection myth, it's huge in the fixed mindset.
Why is effort seen as bad?
Because if you have to try hard, it implies you lack the necessary raw, fixed talent. It suggests deficiency. If you were truly gifted, it would just flow.
And society kind of buys into this, doesn't it?
Hmm.
Dweck mentions Malcolm Gladwell talking about our cultural obsession with natural, effortless accomplishment.
We love that narrative. The hero who just wakes up brilliant. It's seductive, but it's damaging.
Dweck points to certain cultures, like she mentions a French executive, Pierre Chevalier, saying something like, we are not a nation of effort.
Right. Implying that if you have that savoir-faire, that cool inherent know-how, you don't need to break a sweat. Effort becomes, well, kind of vulgar, a sign you don't belong.
And this creates what Dweck calls the gifted curse, which sounds counterintuitive. Being labeled gifted is bad.
It can be, paradoxically. Think about those kids labeled gifted very early on. Dweck shares this letter from a man who felt his whole life was shadowed by that label. He said he realized he spent his life not living up to my potential. Why? Because he was terrified to really apply himself to anything truly difficult.
Afraid of failing and proving the label wrong.
Exactly. If he tried his absolute hardest at something challenging and still failed, well, that would shatter the natural genius identity. The risk felt too great.
So he avoided the risk,
Yeah.
avoided the effort.
Yes. He avoided projects that seemed too hard, quit things when they got difficult, maybe didn't study properly. The burden of protecting that gifted label actually robbed him of his curiosity, his zest for challenge, as Dweck puts it.
Wow, so even positive labels, if they're about fixed traits, can backfire by making people afraid to stretch themselves.
It's a huge trap. Praising effort, praising process, that's what builds resilience. Praising innate intelligence can build fragility.
And this need to constantly prove you're inherently superior
Yeah.
can morph into something else, right? Like an entitlement.
Oh, big time. Especially if that perceived fixed talent brings early success. Dweck uses the tennis player John McEnroe as a prime example here.
McEnroe.
Definitely talented.
Immensely. But by his own admission, he did not love to learn. His focus was almost entirely on proving the talent he believed he was born with. Dweck notes that when things got really tough, when he faced opponents who were maybe less naturally gifted but willing to put in relentless practice,
They often struggled.
he often folded, yeah.
Yeah.
He admitted himself he didn't fulfill his potential. His fixed mindset couldn't handle setbacks gracefully.
And the entitlement piece.
It came directly from that belief in his fixed superiority.
Yeah.
The anecdote about the sawdust is just almost unbelievable.
Remind me.
Okay, so McEnroe, #1 player in the world, knocks over a can of sawdust. You know, the stuff players used to dry sweaty hands back then. And he just explodes at his agent, Gary, screaming, "This looks like rat poison. The sawdust was ground too fine. Can't you get anything right?"
Over sawdust. Serious.
Seriously. And poor Gary, his agent, had to frantically pay a union worker $20 on the spot to literally take a 2x4 and physically grind it into coarser sawdust to meet McEnroe's demands.
It's beyond diva behavior. It's pure fixed mindset defense. If you believe you are inherently superior and fixed, then everything around you has to be perfect too. The court, the calls, the equipment, even the texture of the sawdust has to reflect your exalted status. Any imperfection is an affront. McEnroe summed it up himself, reflecting on being number one. Everything was about you. We'll kiss your behind. That entitlement is a direct product of believing your greatness is innate and deserved.
Okay, so that's the dark side of believing talent is everything and effort is for losers. What's the growth mindset view on effort?
It's the complete opposite. In the growth mindset, effort isn't just necessary, it's what makes the whole process meaningful. It's the engine of transformation.
But here's a question that comes up for me. If the GM is all about perseverance and effort, how do you know when you're just, banging your head against a wall? Isn't there a point where maybe you don't have the aptitude and persistence becomes, well, kind of delusional?
That's a really important question, and Dweck is clear. Growth mindset effort isn't blind, stubborn persistence. It's purposeful engagement. Meaning it involves constantly reflecting, analyzing your strategy, seeking feedback, and adapting. If something isn't working, you don't just do it harder. You figure out why it isn't working and try a different approach.
So it's smart effort, not just more effort.
Exactly. The key difference is how you interpret the failure. The GM person sees failure not as a verdict on who they are, I'm not good enough, but as feedback on the strategy they used. That approach didn't work. Let's try another.
That makes sense. It's about iterating.
Precisely. And you see this transformative power of focused, adaptive effort in stories like Seabiscuit.
The racehorse.
Yeah, the horse, the jockey, the trainer, the owner, they were all seen as broken, washed up. From a fixed mindset view, it's just a story about deficient beings who had to try really hard because they weren't naturally great.
But the growth perspective.
It's a story of transformation through effort. The horse was literally retrained, redeveloped patiently, consistently. Even Laura Hillenbrand, the author writing the book about Seabiscuit, was doing it while battling severe chronic fatigue syndrome. She used the story of their persistence to fuel her own incredible, effortful journey. It's effort-enabling transformation.
Wow. And you see this in top athletes too, right? Like Michael Jordan. The public just sees the natural grace.
We see the highlight reel, the seemingly effortless dunk. But Dweck digs into Jordan's dogged practice. He was famous for his off-season workouts. Even after winning championships, he wasn't taking back. He was in the gym, identifying weaknesses, his defense, his shooting form, whatever it was, and relentlessly working to improve them.
He didn't rest on his talent.
Not at all. He lived the GM philosophy. He said, the mental toughness and the heart are a lot stronger than some of the physical advantages you might have. He was actively upgrading his own genius, seeing talent as just the starting point, the process, the work. That was the real game.
Even Babe Ruth. He seems like the definition of natural talent.
Right. But Dweck points out he wasn't actually a natural hitter early on. He was inconsistent, and he loved practice, which apparently annoyed some veteran teammates who thought talent was enough.
Yeah.
And Ty Cobb had this interesting insight. Ruth started as a pitcher, and pitchers, they're expected to miss sometimes. It's part of the job. Cobb thought that background gave Ruth the psychological freedom to swing big, to not be crushed by striking out. He wasn't trapped by needing every hit to prove his fixed worth.
So being allowed to fail helped him develop.
Plausibly, yeah. And remember, after a really bad season in 1925, Ruth didn't just fade away. He committed to strict discipline, changed his habits, worked incredibly hard, and came back stronger than ever. That wasn't destiny. That was deliberate development fueled by effort.
Okay, so the power of process, of purposeful engagement is clear. How does this play out in education, especially during those tough transition periods?
Oh, education's where the mindsets really show their impact. Dweck's study on kids transitioning to junior high is just fascinating.
Junior high. Yeah, it's a tough time for a lot of kids. Everything gets harder.
Exactly. The work, the grading, the social scene, it's a pressure cooker. So Dweck tracked these students, and when they started the study, they all had basically the same academic records, similar grades, similar achievement test scores, indistinguishable on paper.
Okay, so they started equal, then what?
Then they hit the challenges of junior high, and the mindsets just pulled them in completely different directions. The really striking finding. Only the students with the fixed mindset showed a drop in their grades.
Only the fixed mindset kids declined. What about the growth mindset kids?
Get this. The students with the growth mindset actually showed an increase in their grades over those 2 really challenging years.
An increase, while things were getting harder. How?
It came down to how they coped. When the FN kids got a bad grade, what did they do? They blamed their ability, I guess I'm just stupid, or I'm not good at math. Or they blamed external factors. The teacher is unfair. The subject is boring. Classic fixed responses. Self-condemnation or blaming others.
Protecting the ego or confirming the negative self-view.
Exactly. But the GM kids, they kept their interest up, even if the material wasn't thrilling. They stayed positive. They motivated themselves. They didn't see the difficulty as proof they weren't smart. They saw it as a signal to work harder or try different strategies.
They saw themselves as in control of the process.
Yes, their attitude was basically, okay, this is tough, but I want to succeed, so I need to figure out how. They acted as agents of their own learning, not victims of their perceived limitations.
This connects directly to Dweck's research on praise, doesn't it? Which is so counterintuitive.
Hugely counterintuitive, and so important for parents and teachers. Her research clearly shows that praising a child's intelligence, saying you're so smart, actually hurts their motivation and performance down the line.
Hurts them. Across multiple experiments, kids praised for intelligence became more risk-averse. When offered a choice for the next task, they consistently picked the easier option. Why? They were terrified of doing something hard and failing, because that failure might mean they weren't actually smart after all. They didn't want to lose that label.
Wow. So praising the trait makes them afraid to challenge the trait.
Precisely. You inadvertently teach them that ability is this fragile, fixed thing. If they fail, they internalize it as, I'm not smart anymore.
So what's the alternative? What should we praise?
The process. Focus on the effort, the strategies they use, their concentration, their persistence, their improvement. That's growth mindset feedback.
Can you give an example?
Sure. So instead of looking at a drawing and saying, wow, you're such a talented artist, which focuses on a fixed trait, you say something like, wow, I really love how you kept working on the shading in the trees until you got it just right. Your concentration was amazing.
Focusing on the action, the effort.
Exactly. Or if they solve a tough math problem, instead of, see, you're a math whiz. I'm so impressed with how you stuck with that difficult problem. Trying that new strategy was a great idea. You really stretched yourself.
It shifts the focus from being smart to the process of learning and problem solving.
Perfectly put. And Dweck also gives great advice on how to reassure a child who is struggling. The fixed mindset parent might say, don't worry, you're so smart, you'll be fine. But that just amps up the pressure. What if they're not fine?
Right.
The growth-focused reassurance sounds more like, hey, we know this is tough. We care about your learning, not just the grade. We see how hard you're working and sticking with it, and we're really proud of your effort. Let's talk about what strategies might help. It separates their worth from the immediate outcome.
That feels much more supportive and less anxiety-provoking.
Definitely. It communicates that learning is the goal and effort is the way.
This idea that skills are developed through process, it really challenges how we think about talent, doesn't it? Like drawing, for example.
Yeah.
Most people think you either have it or you don't.
Right. Dweck even admits she felt embarrassed being asked to draw an owl, feeling she just couldn't. It's a common belief drawing is some kind of magic.
But Betty Edwards, with her book Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain,
Yeah.
she argues against that.
Totally. Edwards showed convincingly that drawing isn't mystical talent. It's a set of learnable perceptual skills, which she calls seeing skills. Learning to see edges accurately, understanding negative space, judging angles and proportions, perceiving light and shadow.
Things you can actually teach and practice.
Exactly. And the before and after self-portraits from her intensive workshops are just stunning proof. People go from rudimentary sketches to sophisticated portraits in days just by learning the process of seeing differently.
Wow, that's powerful. And then there's the story of Marva Collins,
Mhm.
the teacher in Chicago.
Oh, Marva Collins is an incredible real-world example of the growth mindset in action. She taught in a tough inner-city school. Many of her students arrived with labels like learning disabled, retarded, emotionally disturbed, labels that scream fixed deficiency.
Yeah, those are heavy labels.
But Collins refused to accept them. She treated every single one of those kids like they were geniuses. She held incredibly high expectations.
And what happened?
The results were just phenomenal. 4-year-olds learning to read by Christmas, second graders reading and discussing Shakespeare, Plato, Aristotle. Kids previously written off were excelling at complex material.
How did she do it? Was it some magic teaching method?
According to Collins herself, no magic. She said, Mrs. Collins is no miracle worker. I just love children and work harder than a lot of people, and so will you. Her secret was a relentless daily focus on fundamentals, hard work, consistent effort, and an unwavering belief in their capacity to develop. She modeled the growth mindset she demanded.
She refused to let the labels define their potential.
Exactly. She proved that potential could be cultivated through rigorous work and high expectations, completely rejecting the idea of fixed limits.
Even with kids who seem like actual prodigies, Dweck suggests the mindset is still key.
Yes, even then. She studied a boy named Michael who was doing things like solving algebra problems and proving algebraic theorems at an incredibly young age, like true prodigy level.
So pure innate ability, right?
Well, Dweck concluded that while the ability was obviously there, what really defined Michael wasn't just the raw processing power. It was his extreme love of learning and challenge. He had this relentless, bottomless curiosity. Engaging in demanding cognitive tasks was, for him, the most fun thing imaginable.
So the drive, the engagement, the mindset was fueling the expression of the talent.
That's how Dweck frames it. The mindset keeps them engaged in the very activities that grow their abilities further. It's a virtuous cycle.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. How do these mindsets show up in really high-stakes environments, like professional sports or business leadership?
Oh, they're battlegrounds for mindset? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sports is a great laboratory.
Talk about Billy Beane, the Moneyball guy.
Uh,
His story as a player is pure fixed mindset trap, right?
Textbook example. Young Billy Beane was a can't-miss prospect. Amazing natural talent in multiple sports. Scouts drooled over him. But he operated, according to Dweck's analysis, with a massive fixed mindset.
What did that look like?
A scout said about him, it wasn't merely that he didn't like to fail. It was as if he didn't know how to fail. When he struck out or made an error, he didn't analyze what went wrong. He'd just explode. Look for something to break a water cooler, a bat, throw a helmet.
Because the failure felt like a judgment on his innate talent.
Exactly. It invalidated the natural star identity. So he couldn't cope with setbacks. His professional playing career, despite all the talent, was ultimately a bust. He actually quit baseball because the risk of not living up to that natural potential felt too terrifying.
But then his perspective changed when he saw Lenny Dykstra.
Right. He's managing later, and he watches Dykstra play. Dykstra didn't have Beane's obvious physical gifts, not even close. But he played with this complete, fearless abandon. Beane was fascinated. Why?
Why?
Because, as Beane realized, Dykstra had no concept of failure. He just didn't register it the same way. If he failed, he just tried again. Same intensity. He wasn't crippled by it.
And that clicked for Beane.
Big time. That realization that the mindset was more critical than the raw talent became the absolute foundation for his revolutionary general manager strategy with the Oakland A's.
The whole Moneyball approach.
Exactly. He realized that the traditional scouting metrics, focusing on natural athletic gifts, were less predictive of actual success than performance stats that reflected process, consistency, and maybe resilience, things like on-base percentage. He started deliberately acquiring players who might not look like stars, but who had skills born from practice and a likely growth mindset. And it worked spectacularly well, building winning teams with one of the lowest payrolls in baseball.
He bought the mindset, not just the perceived talent.
Essentially, yes. And you see echoes elsewhere. Muhammad Ali. By conventional boxing metrics, he was wrong. Didn't block punches traditionally, relied on speed and, well, supreme confidence. He failed the standard physical test for boxing champs early on.
But he won.
He won, often against bigger, stronger opponents like Sonny Liston, because of his mind, his strategy, his ability to adapt, his unconventional approach. He famously said, "Victory comes from the head, not just the fists." Pure growth mindset strategy and adaptation over fixed physical correctness.
And that idea of winning even when things aren't perfect. Billie Jean King mentioned that about champions, right?
Yes. She said, the mark of a champion is the ability to win when you're not at your best, when things are going wrong. And Jackie Joyner-Kersee embodies that.
The track and field legend.
Yeah. In her last Olympics, she suffers this devastating hamstring injury during the heptathlon, her main event. Has to withdraw. Heartbroken. But she recovers enough to compete in the long jump just days later. And she digs deep, pushes through the pain and disappointment, and wins a bronze medal. She later said that bronze, won under those circumstances, felt more precious than her golds.
Why?
Because it was fueled, she said, by all her assorted heartbreaks over the years. She had learned how to turn pain, setbacks, failures into fuel, into motivation. That ability to convert adversity into performance, that's pure growth mindset resilience.
Incredible. Okay, let's look at the corporate world. Does the same dynamic play out with CEOs and leadership?
Oh, absolutely. Dweck talks about how Malcolm Gladwell critiqued corporations for becoming obsessed with talent, finding the naturals, the superstars, often pushed by consulting firms like McKinsey. This talent mindset often leads to promoting fixed mindset leaders.
And what do these fixed mindset leaders look like? Dweck calls them the ego, right?
Yeah, the ego leaders. Their primary drive often isn't the long-term health of the company, but the need to constantly prove their own superiority to validate their fixed genius status. Think of Lee Iacocca at Chrysler post-turnaround, or especially Albert Dunlap Chainsaw Al at Sunbeam and Scott Paper.
Chainsaw Al sounds ominous.
He was ruthless. His entire focus was on one fixed metric, boosting shareholder value quickly to prove he was brilliant. So she'd slash costs dramatically, lay off thousands, make bold moves that looked heroic to Wall Street in the short term.
Love it.
But it often gutted the company's long-term capacity. He prioritized validating his own ego over sustainable growth. Sunbeam eventually collapsed under the weight of his short-term heroics.
And Iacocca, he saved Chrysler initially, right?
He did. But then, Dweck argues, he became addicted to being the fixed genius. He started focusing corporate resources on things that polished his image-lavish office renovations, being a public figure rather than investing deeply in things like long-term manufacturing improvements or innovative design. He stopped listening to criticism, surrounded himself with yes men. It's the classic CEO disease. The leader's ego and need for validation override the necessary, often difficult processes for long-term health.
So what's the growth mindset alternative in leadership?
It's the guide, not the judge. Think about Jim Collins' research in Good to Great. The leaders of those truly exceptional companies, the level 5 leaders, weren't flashy egomaniacs. They were often self-effacing, humble.
Really?
Yeah, they were constantly asking questions. They were willing to confront the brutal facts, meaning failures and problems head-on, without defensiveness. And they maintained unwavering faith that they could eventually succeed through persistent effort. They were focused on building the company, not their own legend.
Like Jack Welch at GE. He's often seen as tough, but Dweck frames him differently.
She highlights a key moment early in his career. He caused a major chemical plant explosion, a huge mistake. Instead of being fired and condemned, which would be the fixed mindset reaction,
Yeah, you'd expect him to be gone.
his superiors reacted with understanding. They focused on learning from the mistake. And that experience, Welch said, taught him a profound lesson. That a leader's job is to guide and develop good people, even through errors, not just judge them for failures. So later, as CEO, he famously focused on developing people, selecting them often for their mindset, their curiosity, their willingness to learn and grow, not just their fancy pedigrees.
Interesting. And Lou Gerstner at IBM?
Another great example, Gerstner was explicitly a growth mindsetter. He was brought into IBM in the early 90s when it was in deep trouble, suffering from a culture Dweck describes as smugness and elitism, classic fixed mindset thinking, resting on past glories.
And Wall Street wanted him to break up the company, right?
Yes, the pressure was immense. Wall Street basically called him a failure early on because he refused to just sell off pieces for a quick buck. Instead, Gerstner focused relentlessly on changing the culture and the process. He forced cooperation between IBM's warring divisions, made the company intensely customer-focused again. It was slow, hard work focused on internal development and process improvement.
And it worked.
It worked spectacularly. He led IBM back to a position of leadership, proving that focusing on growth, process, and cultural change could succeed, where the fixed mindset of just cutting or relying on past genius was failing.
Wow. Okay, so mindset clearly impacts work and achievement. What about our personal lives? Relationships?
Oh, it's just as powerful, maybe even more so in our intimate lives. How we handle love, conflicts, social interactions. Mindset is running the show behind the scenes.
So the fixed mindset in love, what does that look like? Dweck calls it the meant-to-be fallacy.
Exactly. The meant-to-be fallacy. People with a fixed mindset tend to believe that relationships should be, like, magic, effortless. You find your soulmate and you expect instant, perfect, and perpetual compatibility. It's either inherently good, meant to be, or it's inherently flawed and doomed.
Black and white thinking.
Very much so. And this creates huge problems. First, big one. If the relationship requires work, if you have to actively try to communicate better or resolve conflicts, That's seen as a bad sign. It must mean it wasn't meant to be.
Which is the opposite of what relationship experts say, right?
Completely. Experts like Aaron Beck or John Gottman stress that the belief that relationships require work is absolutely essential for success. Beck even calls the idea, if we need to work at it, there's something seriously wrong, one of the most destructive beliefs in modern relationships.
So problem one is
Mhm.
work equals flaw. What's the second problem?
Judgment and blame. When conflicts inevitably arise, or when flaws surface because everyone has flaws, the fixed mindset partner tends to become critical, even contemptuous, and they blame the partner's fixed personality traits.
Ah, not the behavior, but the person's core being.
Right, they're not thinking, we had a communication breakdown. They're thinking, he's inherently moody, or she's fundamentally selfish. Dweck uses the example of Max and Charlene. Max gets moody, Charlene feels shut out. Instead of discussing the dynamic, how his mood affects her, how her withdrawal affects him, they get stuck blaming fixed traits. Max is moody, flaw. Charlene shuts down, flaw.
And it becomes a contest?
Often, yeah. It can devolve into who is the better partner, the smarter one, the more talented one, the more likable one. Like Dweck's example of Cynthia, the brilliant scientist. She'd get into relationships, then inevitably get interested in her partner's hobbies, music, cooking, whatever, and quickly surpass them because she was so driven.
And the partners couldn't handle it.
They felt diminished. Because in the fixed mindset world, it's often a zero-sum game. Her success felt like their failure, highlighting their perceived fixed limitations, so they'd leave.
Wow. And this leads to people endlessly searching for the perfect, problem-free partner.
Yes. The ultimate example is Penelope, the woman Dweck describes, who kept breaking up with seemingly great guys over minor flaws. One wore the wrong shoes, another had annoying cell phone habits.
Picky.
Extremely. But it comes from the fixed mindset belief that a perfect, problem-free candidate must exist out there. She's ignoring that fundamental relationship wisdom from therapist Daniel Weil. Choosing a partner isn't about finding someone without problems. It's about consciously choosing a set of problems you're willing to navigate together for the long haul.
That's a sobering but realistic thought. Okay, so how does the growth mindset approach relationships and conflict?
Totally differently. GM partners see conflict, disagreements, even betrayals, not as final verdicts on the relationship's worth, but as, well, information, as opportunities to learn and grow individually and together.
So less blame, more understanding.
Exactly. The focus shifts to understanding the dynamic, forgiving mistakes if appropriate, and figuring out how to move forward and improve the process. Failure is data for future improvement.
Dweck shares stories of people looking back on failed relationships.
Yeah, and instead of just bitterness, you hear things like, well, that relationship ending really taught me the importance of clear communication, or it helps me understand what I actually need in a partner. They extracted value, learned lessons, rather than just feeling like a failure.
It fosters resilience then, like Dweck's cousin Kathy.
Oh, Kathy's story is so powerful. Her husband of over 20 years leaves her, then she suffers a bad injury shortly after. A double blow. Could easily lead to despair.
Yeah, totally understandable.
But one night, sitting alone, she just makes this declaration, I'll be damned if I'm going to sit here and feel sorry for myself. She chose growth. She chose action. She got involved in things, went out, eventually met someone new and remarried. It wasn't luck. It was a conscious decision to embrace growth and agency even in the face of pain.
Choosing action over rumination.
Yes. And crucially, GM partners prioritize constructive communication. Remember Brenda and Jack fighting over her boring work stories? In their heads, they were assigning fixed traits. Brenda is boring, Jack is selfish. But the therapist helped them see the process issue. Brenda told stories to show engagement, Jack stayed quiet, trying to be polite. Once they reframed it as a communication disconnect, not a fundamental personality flaw in either of them, they could actually solve it constructively.
Seeing the process, not just the person.
It's the key.
And how does this play out in wider social situations, like dealing with bullying or prejudice?
The mindset difference is stark there, too. The judgmental nature of the fixed mindset really fuels things like bullying. When FM students get bullied, they tend to take it very personally. It feels like a confirmation of their fixed inadequacy. I am a loser. They're right about me.
And that leads to
Intense shame, hopelessness, and sometimes, Dweck's research found, disturbing fantasies of violent revenge as the only way to restore their damaged sense of worth. Also, negative stereotypes hit FM individuals much harder because the stereotype, your group is inherently inferior, less intelligent, etc., resonates perfectly with their underlying belief in fixed, unchangeable traits.
Ugh. So how do growth mindset students handle bullying?
They tend to externalize it more. They analyze the situation. They're more likely to see the bully's behavior as reflecting the bully's psychological issues or maybe their need for status, rather than seeing it as a valid judgment on themselves.
So it's their problem, not mine.
Kind of, yeah. Or at least their behavior says more about them than it does about my fundamental worth. And their solutions reflect this. They're less likely to fantasize about revenge and more likely to think about confronting the bully or trying to educate them.
Like, why are you doing this?
Exactly. Dweck quotes students saying things like, I would ask them questions. Why are they saying all of these things? And try to help them. They see it as a dynamic that could potentially be changed through communication or understanding, not just a fixed insult to be endured or avenged.
That connects to the work of people trying to change bullying culture,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Experts like Stan Davis focus on helping victims shift away from helplessness or revenge fantasies towards constructive, assertive, nonviolent responses. And the child psychologist, Haim Janot, had this amazing approach.
What did he do?
He wrote a letter to an 8-year-old bully, Jay. But instead of condemning him, you are a bad kid, the teacher, using Janot's advice, treated Jay with respect, addressed him as a leader, acknowledged his influence, and then asked for his advice on how to help the child he was picking on.
Wow, flipping the script entirely.
Totally. It reframed Jay from bully, a fixed negative trait, to potential leader who can help solve a problem, a growth opportunity. It pointed him toward constructive action and improvement, completely bypassing the usual cycle of judgment and blame.
That's brilliant. Okay, so we've seen the huge impact of these mindsets across life. The big question then is, can we actually change our mindset? If I recognize I have a fixed mindset, am I stuck with it?
That's the most hopeful part of the whole book. Dweck is absolutely emphatic. Mindsets are not permanent fixtures. Yes, they can feel like core parts of our personality, but they are beliefs, and beliefs can be changed.
So it's possible to shift from fixed to growth.
Absolutely. In fact, Dweck says just learning about the two mindsets is the crucial first step. Once you understand the difference, you can start catching yourself in those fixed mindset moments.
Like when you feel that urge to quit because something's hard.
Exactly. Or when you catch yourself making excuses for a failure, or feeling jealous of someone else's success instead of inspired, just recognizing, that's my fixed mindset talking, gives you immediate power. You can pause and choose a different response.
And this isn't just psychological trickery, right? There's brain science behind it.
Yes, the concept of neuroplasticity is key. Dweck talks about brainology, teaching people that the brain isn't fixed. When you learn new things, when you challenge yourself, when you practice skills, you are literally forging new neural connections. Your brain physically changes and gets stronger, smarter.
Like a muscle getting stronger with exercise.
Precisely. And knowing this, Dweck found, is incredibly motivating. In some of her studies, they ran workshops where they just taught students this neuroscience, how effort grows your brain. And that knowledge alone led to a measurable improvement in their grades and motivation.
Just knowing that effort physically changes your brain makes you more willing to put in the effort.
It reframes effort from a sign of weakness to the very mechanism of growth.
Okay, so knowing is the first step. But Dweck offers more concrete steps for actually making the change, doesn't she?
She does. It's a practical 4-step process for actively cultivating a growth mindset.
Okay, lay them out for us. Step 1.
Step 1, learn to hear your fixed mindset voice. You have to become aware of that internal judge, the voice that whispers or shouts, you can't do this, you're not smart enough, if you fail, you'll be a laughingstock, just quit now, see, they're better than you. Recognize the specific persona, give it a name if you want. Acknowledge its presence.
Okay, identify the enemy within. Step 2.
Step 2, recognize that you have a choice. This is crucial. When you face a setback, a failure, criticism, a challenge, understand that the event itself doesn't have a fixed meaning. You choose how to interpret it. You can see it through the fixed lens, condemnation, proof of inadequacy, or through the growth lens, information, a problem to be solved, a chance to learn. The interpretation is a choice.
So pause and realize you can frame it differently. Step 3.
Step 3, talk back to the fixed mindset voice with your growth mindset voice. This is where you actively argue with that internal judge. When the FM voice says, you failed, you're a total loser, give up, the GM voice needs a ready reply. Something like, okay, I didn't get the result I wanted, that's disappointing, but failure is part of learning. What can I learn from this? What strategy didn't work? What can I try differently next time? This is information, not a final verdict.
It's like having an internal debate and consciously choosing the growth argument.
Exactly. You don't have to silence the FM voice entirely, but you don't let it drive the car. You acknowledge it, then counter it with the growth perspective.
And the final step, step 4.
Step 4, take the growth mindset action. This is where the rubber meets the road. Knowing and arguing internally isn't enough. You have to act based on the growth perspective. And Dweck emphasizes using implementation intentions here.
Implementation intentions, what are those?
They're specific, concrete plans about when, where, and how you'll take the growth action. It's not just a vague goal like, I'll study harder. If it's Tuesday evening after dinner, then I will spend 45 minutes reviewing the chapter that confused me using the new note-taking method. Or if my boss gives me critical feedback, then I will take a deep breath, thank them, and ask clarifying questions about how I can improve instead of getting defensive.
So super specific if-then plans. Why is that so important?
Because it automates the action. It takes willpower and momentary feelings out of the equation. You've pre-decided the growth action. When the situation arises, the if, you just execute the plan, the then, regardless of whether you feel motivated or confident in that exact moment. You stick to the process.
Learn to hear it, know you have a choice, talk back to it, and take specific, planned growth actions. That feels doable.
It is doable. It takes practice, conscious effort, but it's a skill you can build.
And how can families or parents use this? Can you create a growth mindset culture at home?
Oh, absolutely. Dweck suggests the dinner table is a fantastic place to start building that culture.
What do you talk about?
Instead of the default fixed mindset questions like, what grade did you get, or did you win the game, which focus only on outcomes and fixed validation, shift the focus to process and learning. Ask everyone, parents included, what did you learn today that was new or interesting? What mistake did you make today that actually taught you something valuable? What did you have to try really hard at today?
Ooh, I like those questions. They completely reframe what's valued.
Exactly. It sends a powerful message. In this family, we value effort, learning, tackling challenges, and growing. We don't just value innate specialness or easy wins. It makes it safe to talk about struggles and mistakes as learning opportunities, not as sources of shame.
And parents need to model this themselves, right? Talk about their own learning and struggles.
Crucial. Parents have to consistently communicate through words and actions that they value the process of learning and effort in all areas, not just school, but sports, hobbies, making friends, understanding emotions, everything. If kids see their parents embracing challenges and learning from mistakes, it normalizes the growth mindset for them.
Even if a child seems resistant at first.
Consistency is key. Keep focusing on process, effort, strategies, and learning. Over time, that consistent family culture valuing growth over fixed perfection can gently guide them away from needing to be an instant star and towards finding genuine satisfaction in the effort itself, even for small improvements.
It really sounds like a fundamental shift in perspective.
It really is, and that's the core message, I think. The growth mindset isn't just about achieving more, although that often happens. It's fundamentally about finding joy and meaning in the process itself.
How so?
It's about loving what you do, whatever it is, and finding ways to continue loving it, especially when it gets difficult. Choosing the growth mindset lets you approach challenges with curiosity instead of fear. It allows you to look back on your efforts, your struggles, your learning, and say, you know what? I gave my all. I stretched myself. I pursued things I valued, even when it was hard.
As opposed to the fixed mindset epitaph, I could have been a contender.
Exactly. The fixed mindset often leaves people polishing their unused potential, lamenting what might have been if only things had been easier or if only they'd been gifted enough. The growth mindset lets you own your journey, struggles and all. The story you tell yourself about your life. That choice is fundamentally yours.
And here's a final thought that really struck me. It's almost paradoxical. Dweck points out that many of the people we now see as pinnacles of success, the ones who reach the very top,
Yeah.
they often didn't start out with the goal of being the best or reaching the summit. That wasn't their primary driver. They got there almost as a byproduct.
A byproduct of what?
A byproduct of their intense, passionate enthusiasm for the process itself. They were so absorbed in the learning, the challenges, the effort, the day-to-day engagement with what they loved, that they ended up at the top without necessarily aiming for it directly.
That's fascinating. The ultimate irony, maybe.
Yeah.
You reach the destination by focusing completely on the journey.
Right. Forget the fixed goal, embrace the growth process, and the outcome might just surprise you. So we really hope you take these ideas and run with them. We want to challenge you, listening right now. Pick one of those 4 steps for changing your mindset. Just one. And try applying it this week. Maybe focus specifically on step 4. Create one concrete implementation intention to tackle a small, fixed mindset trigger you know you have.
And please, do engage with the author, Carol S. Dweck. Find her online, share your thoughts on the book, maybe share your experiences trying these steps. This isn't just theory, it's a framework that really comes alive through active practice and discussion.
Absolutely. And if this conversation sparked your interest, we highly encourage you to get the book, Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. There's so much more depth, so many more examples and nuances we couldn't cover. It's truly worth the read to continue exploring and developing your own mindset.
It really is a life changer for many people.
Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the world of mindsets. Please follow, subscribe, and if you found this valuable, share the Plain Books podcast with someone else who might benefit.
We appreciate you tuning in.
We'll see you next time.